Welcome to the Inside Slant Podcast, brought to you by Jayhawkslant.com. Here's the staff from Jayhawk Slant, the online leader in KU coverage since 1999.
Hey everybody, this is Randy Withers. Welcome into another pregame edition, the last pregame edition possibly of the 2025 football season from the Inside Slant podcast and Jayhawkslant.com. And we're doing this one Thanksgiving style. We're going to talk about the Jayhawks playing in the third place game of the Players Era tournament and take a look at Friday's matchup on the gridiron against Utah and in what is do or die for the Jayhawks bowl eligibility. We'll be joined by Steve Bartle, who covers Utah for KSL, and he gives us a closer look at the Utes program and the opponent scout from the opposing sideline in the Friday's matchup. Before we get into that, let me bring in our man on the Kansas men's basketball beat from the Allen Fieldhouse suite, Mr. Shea Wildeboer. Shea, how you doing today?
I'm good, buddy. We're closing in on Turkey Day. I'm trying to get all my lights up. It's a busy time. The basketball team's rolling. KU's trying to get bowl eligible. Will the Jayhawks survive tomorrow or Friday? Will they become bowl eligible? That's the question.
Ooh, I hope so. I hope so. And that's, you know what? Hey, it's perfect. That's a great transition. Go ahead and bring in our man on the Kansas football beat and the publisher of Jayhawk Slant, Mr. John Kirby. John, Shea asked the question, will this team be bowl eligible come Friday night?
Well, I guess we'll get into that a little bit later in the podcast, right? I mean, we don't want to sit here and steal the thunder from everything.
Hey, listen, Randy, I drove by Curbs House the other day. I had to stop off. He's got all of his lights up. He's got the lawn looking clean.
Oh, wow, John.
Yeah. Cindy was making breakfast. He's got the little dog separator, so we didn't get it. I mean, listen, if anybody's living the life, it's John Kirby.
There you go, John.
Hey, let me tell you this.
His boys walked in and he said, "Mom, Dad need some food money." They were rolling over the Curb House.
Oh shit! Hey, let me tell you what. For my two boys, it's like a dang hotel here, man. Let me tell you that. It's like a goddamn Kirby Inn. Shit, my youngest just came back from KU yesterday, and
is the refrigerator already empty?
Well, dude, this morning he just said, "Hey, can I take your card? I want to go get some coffee and something." I'm like, "Just eat something here." I'm like, but, he's like, "What do you mean, take my card?" So I got to tell you this too, and I got to brag on him. You know, he signed at KU to run track, and he had to medically retire after they went in and they took tendons out of his knee to try to fix it. Then he broke his ankle, and they had to go in and they repaired 3 impingements, and this was all in his takeoff leg, right?
Oh, gosh.
Well, during all this, he wants to be an orthopedic surgeon, so it's hard. It is hard to do track. It's hard to be a D1 athlete and try to be pre-med. Matter of fact, there's just not many that do it.
No question.
Well, so anyway, he's kind of turned his focus to all that, and he's moved up the MCAT. So he's going to take the MCAT early because he's had to do a lot of catching up. So hey, I don't feel bad giving him the card this morning to go, because the kid has been busted, and he's working over at Lawrence Hospital with some of the orthopedic people, like 10 to 15 hours a week while he's doing all the school. So anyways, I don't feel bad, but sometimes I'm like, God dang, guys. And then Shay's right. We got this big divider in our kitchen because our lab puppy, that dog will jump up on the counter and eat every damn thing we got in the house. So we've got to keep him away from the counters.
Oh boy.
Hey, no lie, man. It's a story. I saw it firsthand, Randy.
You know, before the puppy jumps up on the cabinet and starts digging into Thanksgiving dinner before y'all can get it in the oven, we better get this thing rolling.
Well, hey, and I do want to put this plug in for people listening who aren't subscribers. I know most everybody is, or quite a few, but I mean our reach. I mean, we usually get 700 downloads on these podcasts right once it goes up away. So I know not everybody's a subscriber, but we've got our Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals. Keep an eye out for those. It's going to be a pretty good deal where you go in, you get a free year to The Athletic, and a $1 trial. So keep your eye out. We're about ready getting into the fun stuff, following all the recruiting. Well, fun for all you guys. I don't know if it's fun for me tracking all this portal stuff and dealing with all the agents, but
Oh boy.
we'll have some specials
Oh
running.
boy.
Well, let's go ahead and, like I say, let's get into this thing before Thanksgiving dinner gets gobbled up by the puppy getting up on the countertop. Shay, let's talk men's basketball first, like we normally do. The Jayhawks are still playing without Darren Peterson, number one player in the country, but have managed to string together a couple of pretty good performances. What have you seen from this team? And as you look ahead to the matchup with Tennessee in the third place game, what do you see when you look ahead to that matchup?
I love this group, Randy. Not to take away anything from the last 2 years, but this group is just different. And this is what I saw last night. And you guys know I'm an emotional guy, so when I see like stuff like this, it hits home. So after the game last night, they pulled Trey White over to talk about his performance and about the big win. And before he got to center court to do that interview, he called all over his teammates. So everybody was there, everybody was huddled up at center court, everybody was hooting and hollering, and that's just different. That's something we haven't seen at the University of Kansas in a couple of years. So I love the makeup of this team, man. You've got Flory playing the way that Flory's playing, a double-double man. You got Trey White that's really playing well. You've got Bryson Tiller that's playing extremely well. Guys rebounding the ball, guys hitting shots. Yesterday in his first start, you had Jamari McDowell, who hit two threes and scored 9 points. Melvin Council hasn't been great from behind the arc, but he's coming around and scoring. The one thing that this group does really well is they play together. I think they enjoy playing with each other. I think there's a ton of camaraderie both on and off the court. And even without Darren Peterson, these guys have found a way to make things happen. And I think that's a true sign of a real team. I mean, listen, this team, I love covering this team because they're a bunch of guys that love playing together. They're a bunch of guys that love being around each other, and I think that's shown with the success they've had on the court so far.
Totally agree. I saw that last night where when they go over the interview, like you say, and he pulled his whole team in, and that was
Right.
my first thought. Just like you said, we haven't seen that in a
No.
long time, and it was refreshing to say the least. I wanted to
I mean, I
ask
think
you,
they too, like and also like when Syracuse made a run and when Notre Dame made a run, KU didn't not necessarily fold, but they didn't back down. They didn't crumble to the pressure. They answered the call, and again, that's something that we haven't seen in the last couple of years. So I love the makeup of this team and the toughness as well.
how much good is is this doing right now? Talk about the makeup and the toughness of this team. How much are these games going to impact this squad? And when it comes to the experience that it's hopefully providing in hopes that when Darren Peterson gets back, that he can fit right in with this group.
Oh, I think it's huge. When these guys had to find themselves, and I'm not sure they would have had the chance to do that the way they have with him out. And here's another thing, Randy. There are going to be games when teams throw defenses at him, when they throw junk stuff at him. There are going to be games when he may cramp up again, or there are going to be games where he may hit foul trouble. And this team has to learn to win without him. And they've done that. And listen, you guys, it's not like they're playing Division II, sister of the Christian Blind or whatever Roy Williams used to say schools. These are legitimate schools that they're playing in Notre Dame and Syracuse. And
Absolutely.
they're finding ways to win. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think that happens last year. I mean, I know that KU had a big win against Duke, and I know that Hunter was out. And I know they had the big win against UConn. They had the big win against Carolina. But other than that, I mean, when it came time to play, oftentimes this team struggled a lot, and I don't see that out of this team. I mean, listen, I thought Cole Rosario yesterday coming off the bench really played well. I know he's struggling right now. There was no pouting, there was no moping, there was no hey, what about me? He just went out when his number was called. He performed, and I think that's huge. I mean, if you can do all these things without Darren Peterson. Imagine how good you're going to be with Darren Peterson when everything's clicking. Because not only does he score, he takes attention away from himself and allows other teammates to open things up. And so I think that's going to be huge for this team.
Before you go, or before I let you go, let's put it that way. Give any news coming from the recruiting trail? Anything that you're following right now that you can give people to chew on as they gear up for Thanksgiving dinner?
Obviously, we talked last week. Keep an eye on Tyron Stokes. Some things have kind of gone quiet, and I did. I expected that to be the case. I didn't think that he would come out and do anything, but that's definitely one you want to monitor. And then recently, Bruce Branch from Prolific Prep. He was the class of 2027. He's moved to 2026. He was the number one player in 2027. He is now. He got replaced. I think he's the number 20 or the number five player in the class of 2026. Keep an eye out. There's going to be a ton of teams. 6'7", 185 pound small forward. Kansas is in there, Arizona's in there, Duke's in there, a ton of teams. But I can tell you this, Kansas loves him. And I would expect them to make a move once he gets settled and kind of once he figures out when he can take some visits and when he has an opportunity to do that. You can't take both. It's going to have to be one of Stokes or Branch. But they've got, and I know you guys heard this the other day. Self said we're one elite guy away from having a really good class, and I know that he wants to add one more guy, and I expect him to make a push to do so.
That's our man Shea Wildebour on the men's basketball beat. Shea, thanks a lot, man. Happy
Happy
Thanksgiving to you and
Thanksgiving,
your
brothers.
family.
You
Yep.
too.
That's Shea Wildebour and Kirby. Shay started talking about you. You jumped right in. I get a chance to officially introduce and welcome you onto the podcast like we normally do. So, our man on the Kansas football beat, the publisher at Jayhawks Slant, Mr. John Kirby, joins us now to talk some Kansas Jayhawk football. John, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Yep. Same to you and yours.
Let's not go back too much into the past and what happened against Iowa State, but give me your thoughts on the road trip to Ames and on the loss to the Cyclones.
Yeah, Randy, is disappointing. Very disappointing.
Yes.
Just the way the game started, falling behind and just kind of out of the game from right when it kicked off. It's just not what any of us expected. I don't think any of the KU fan base expected it. So, I said going into that Iowa State game that Kansas has really only played one bad game all year. That's Kansas State. Okay.
Hmm.
You can take the Texas Tech game, all right, where it was a close game at half, but Texas Tech's going to beat a lot of people in Lubbock. So I don't sit there and look at that game and go, boy, Kansas, that was a stinker. You know what? Texas Tech can do that to a lot of people. But you even go back through some of the losses, and they had Cincinnati beat, they had Arizona beat, they had the ball with the chance to take the lead late against Missouri. I mean, you go back and look. And I said going into this game, the one stinker was Kansas State. Well, now we got two to add to the list because I was really disappointed in what they did at Iowa State. And I said this going in, Randy, and I still believe it 100%. Kansas is every bit as athletic and faster than Iowa State in a lot of positions. So
Hmm.
I struggled with the fact that Rocco Becht did not look good a few of his previous performances before that game, and then he comes out against KU and looks like a Heisman guy. And the offense, which I expected to move the ball, they struggled to move the ball. That was a disappointment. I do think the defensive line got better after the first quarter where the Iowa State was running. The yards got much tougher to come by. But overall, that game in Ames is one of the two most disappointing games of the season for me.
The Jayhawks welcome Utah on Friday morning for the last regular season game of 2025, and with bowl eligibility hinging on the outcome against the Utes. To get a better look at the Utah squad, we've got a great preview lined up as John interviewed Steve Bartle from KSL Sports.
We are joined by Steve Bartle, who covers Utah for KSL Sports, and he's going to give us a closer look at Utah's program and the upcoming game on Friday. Steve, thank you very much for joining us.
John, appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to this matchup Friday morning, Black Friday. It should be pretty interesting.
So, tell me about your guys' plans. When do you travel out, and how are you going to do Thanksgiving meal?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting one. So I've got a small family. Me and uh, my wife and little child. They're going to stay home. I'm actually heading out Wednesday night because I did not book early enough, and travel on Thanksgiving was pretty doozy. Was a pretty big doozy. So I'm going to be out there from Wednesday night to Saturday morning, and really looking forward to it. I think I have a reservation at Sullivan Steakhouse for Thursday night,
Okay,
and then
yeah.
and then from there we'll see what the rest of the week brings. But looking forward to getting out there.
Well, you can't beat steak on Thanksgiving. So, hey,
Yeah,
listen,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you this. I watched the Kansas State game. Well, I mean, what a great college football game. And I mean, Utah, listen, they looked dead in the water and came back. Well, just talk about that game and the atmosphere and what were your takeaways from that game?
Yeah, it was an interesting game because we've become used to watching Utah being the one that runs all over teams this season, and to see and watch Kansas State do what Utah has done to a few other programs this season, it was it was really interesting. You could feel sort of the vibe in the stadium. It was pretty down. It was pretty trodden and just wasn't what it typically is. And I think with the way that Kansas State came out in that game, it was a big credit to them first and foremost. They came out, they punched Utah in the mouth and continued to punch, continued to swing. But I think what we saw from this Utah squad was, despite their struggles, they just continued to fight back. They continued to show that toughness. They didn't quit. They didn't give up. And those are things that Kyle Whittingham has long preached as the head coach here at Utah football. That's those are some of the qualities and traits that he's instilled in this program, and to see that play out the way that it did Saturday night, where you had a defense that just could not stop the Kansas State rushing attack. It was a very basic play. It was, Kyle Whittingham said it was A gap power,
Yep.
which again is pretty simple stuff to defend. But Utah, just for whatever reason, did not come out defensively with the same sort of physicality and toughness and discipline that we've grown accustomed to, and Kansas State took full advantage. And again, they finally buckled down late in that fourth quarter, made a couple of plays, and the offense was able to do enough to keep them, within range, within fighting, within striking distance, and finally to get those stops, and for Devin Dampier to step up even after a fumble midway through that fourth quarter, where that sort of felt like the final blow, the knockout punch for Utah. For him to bounce back after that fumble and lead Utah on two, not one, but two 70-yard touchdown drives in the final 7 minutes. It was one of the craziest finishes to a game. I mean, it's up there in the conversation with Cam Rising and Utah against USC in 2022, which was very similar. Utah having to fight back, and it came down to a 2-point conversion that Utah converted in the final seconds to get that game. Fans left midway through that fourth quarter after that fumble, but the ones that stuck around, as Kyle Whittingham put in his Monday, in his postgame presser, they were, it was a special treat delivered to them, for sticking around and watching that team fight back to pull out the victory.
Watching that game, and I know Whittingham said in his press conference that you'll know more about the injury situation tonight when the report comes out. But I know the defensive end is just phenomenal. He went down, and I think the All-American right tackle went down too. How can that affect things?
Yeah, for Utah, they did suffer a couple of injuries. Fortunately for Utah on that offensive side of the ball, right tackle Spencer Fano, though he left the game and had to be helped off, he was back in later to help Utah on that final drive. So
Okay,
he actually
interesting.
came back into the game and finished the game out. But the defensive end you mentioned, John Henry Daly, he's got 11 and a half sacks this season. He's been number 2 right behind David Bailey all season long. And unfortunately, he has suffered a pretty significant injury that won't just cost him the end of this season, but will likely cost him 2020, a good chunk of 2026 at the very least. So that was a brutal one for Utah to lose him, because he has been such a dynamic playmaker off the edge. He leads the team in sacks and tackles for loss. He is just a threat, attacking the backfield. Fortunately for Utah, though, they do have depth. They may not have the sort of playmaking ability that to replace John Henry Daly behind him, but they've got guys that can certainly fill that role and provide some playmaking and some stability, at that spot. So Utah is just going to move forward with that next man up mentality that they've instilled in the program as well, and that's going to be the key for Utah on that defensive side of the ball is getting quality play out of others around that defensive end spot. But outside of that, there is another receiver, Ryan Davis, the leading receiver, who suffered an injury on Saturday as well that will likely be out this week. But Utah got others to step up in that receiver room as well. So, some unfortunate injuries for Utah, but I think they were able to get it out of that one with their top, tackle. When you talk about the NFL draft and how he's viewed as a prospect, he is a first round draft pick.
Yeah, I've seen that
prospect. And so, he's healthy, and I think that's the biggest thing for Utah is he's healthy and he's good to go.
Well, I always usually start out when we have guests. It seems like I always start out by nature on the offensive side. But I wanted to ask you about defense because when I've followed Utah from afar, their defenses have always been so good. But I've watched every snap of their game against Baylor and every snap of their game against Kansas State. And Baylor, I want to say, put up like 560 yards, and they were kind of moving the ball, at will, if you will, that they just weren't able to find the end zone. And then obviously Kansas State. So just talk about Utah's defense. What do you think they've got to do to kind of flip the switch and get back to what they're known for?
Yeah, I think, credit belongs to Baylor and to Kansas State for doing what they did against Utah. And for that Baylor game, Sawyer Robertson, he's a tremendous quarterback. And he's got a fantastic group of receivers to throw to. And I think Utah understood that and did their best to just make Baylor inefficient. Utah isn't concerned as much about yards given up. They're just focused on, efficiency and scoring production. That is their big focus. And so, despite giving up 500 yards to Baylor through the air, they were able to limit them on the scoreboard, get some takeaways that also sort of contributed to, what that box score looked like. Utah had a pick six that was taken back 65 yards by Scooby Davis. And so, Baylor had just been driving. They turn it over. Utah scores, off the turnover, and then Baylor's back on the field driving again. And those types of things can kind of influence what a box score looks like,
sure,
in terms of the total yardage. So there was a little bit of that. They had another interception late in the game that was returned to the 9-yard line. So again, another takeaway that set up the Baylor offense to get back on the field in a pretty quick manner. And then with Kansas State, I just feel like Utah was not fully prepared for what they saw with that running attack. And you go back to the week before, and Kansas State looked like a dead fish in the water. They looked horrible against Kansas State. And maybe Utah was overlooking Kansas State a little bit. I don't know, but they just didn't come with the physicality that they typically play with, particularly up front. And given the pride that they have on that side of the ball, Morgan Scalley owned the issues. Like, he took full ownership of the defense failing to perform against Kansas State, said that he did not have the team ready to go in any sort of fashion, and that was going to be rectified this week. So I anticipate that Utah is going to have a much better outing, defensively this week, because again, there's just a lot of pride on that side of the ball, and they've got good coaches that know how to get these guys playing good defense.
All right, moving over to the offense, man, the one thing that's been impressive watching Utah is they create different ways to run the ball. They bring in that true freshman, and then Dampier can run. They've got running backs, and they got speed, and it looks like they're just one of those old school teams that go, hey, we're going to find all kinds of different ways to run the football. And, it's almost like a spread. It's almost like a run spread or something. But it's been impressive to watch. Just tell us about the offense and maybe who are a few players to keep an eye on.
Yeah, obviously with the offense, Devin Dampier, he generates the headlines, but this offensive line is what makes this team as good as it is on the ground. It's what allows Utah to be as creative as they are and as effective as they are with some of this run play stuff that they're doing. You know, it's an option attack with Dampier, at the helm. They bring in the freshman Bird Ficklin to kind of supplement some of those carries so that Dev isn't taking on a bigger workload because Dampier he's taken some hits and those take a toll over the course of a season, and so Bird has stepped up and man he's capitalized on his opportunities pretty emphatically with what he's doing. He's now totaled 10 touchdowns on the year on the ground alone. He's just 4 yards short of 500 yards on the season, and he's done all this on just 54 carries. So I mean that
God.
kind of speaks to the the efficiency and explosiveness that he's brought to the run game. And then you've got Wayshawn Parker, who is just starting to hit his stride. Utah was pretty mindful of his workload early on in the season. They knew that they wanted to be a heavy rushing attack, but Wayshawn Parker is so dynamic that they didn't want him to wear it down. And so Nakari Rogers was kind of that workhorse guy early on in the season. He was the guy leading Utah in carries for the first half of the year. But since mid-October, Wayshawn Parker has really kind of taken hold of that RB1 job, and he's delivered. He's now had 4 straight games of 100 yards rushing. He's added some explosiveness, some big playability that Rogers just didn't have. And then they've incorporated a number of other guys into the rushing attack as well. They've got Daniel Bray, who's another freshman that adds speed to get to the edge, and his balance is incredible. The way that he can change directions at the speed at which he's playing. Nate Johnson is another guy in a similar mold, kind of a speedy athlete, and so they've just found a way to incorporate all of these different players in a number of different ways, and it's kept defenses off balance. And with the offensive line that Utah has, it's really been a tremendous marriage of scheme and personnel.
This is kind of a different game, kicking off early in the morning after Thanksgiving. It's a quick turnaround for both teams. Utah's still in the playoff picture, but, just tell me, what do you expect from this Utah team going on the road, and how do you see this matchup against the Jayhawks?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I think, this is one that, I remember going back to preseason talk before all the season kicked off. This was a game that a lot of people had circled as an interesting one, as a trap game even, given where it is on the calendar, right? The day after Thanksgiving, going on the road early in the morning to play. They'll fly out Thursday night, but again, just playing 11 a.m. Central Time out there, that's different, especially on a Friday. The body clocks and that sort of stuff. Those are things that we sort of take for granted, but certainly play a role in how players perform and execute. So I think there is a bit of concern from the fan base about how this team is going to handle all of that. But in terms of how the players and coaches have talked about this game, this is all business. This is what Utah they're going into this matchup looking to get win number 10 in the regular season for the first time since 2019, when Utah had Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss and some all-time greats, leading the way on that defense side of the ball. So there's a big point of pride for Utah in getting that win. And, with Kyle Whittingham and, where he's at in his career, I think it would be a significant thing for him as well to get this team to 10 wins, especially given, what transpired last year with Utah going 5-7 and all of that. I think there's a lot of pride in, from Utah's end to come into this game looking to handle their business. And they know that Kansas is very formidable, especially after last week with the way that Kansas State ran the ball. Kansas is pretty dynamic with Jalen Daniels and that rushing attack. So they know that they've got to come in really prepared for a fight. And that's going to be their mindset going into it. We had the opportunity to talk to Dampier and to Jonathan Hall, the linebacker, and they're very businesslike this week. They know how important this is, not only for kind of the big picture talk, but they're slim, hanging on by a thread, Big 12 title hopes, and as well as their at-large hopes in the college football playoff race. They have to take care of business, stay in that conversation, and then hope for chaos all around them. And that's going to be key for them. And that's sort of the mindset that they've embraced, is taking it one game at a time. And that's what they've been able to do. And this is the big one to finish off, a really impressive November. If they get the win over Kansas, to go 3-0 against Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas would be a pretty significant accomplishment for the Utes.
It's a great preview of the game. That is Steve Bartle from KSL Sports. Does a great job. He tells us what to expect from the Utes. Steve, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you on Friday.
Yeah, looking forward to it, John. Excited to get out to Lawrence and take this game in. Should be a lot of fun.
That was Steve Bartle, and he gave a great scouting report and gives you an idea of exactly what Lance Leipold and his squad are in for on Friday morning. Kirby, let's get into this thing. What are your thoughts on the matchup, and what's your prediction for the regular season finale?
Yeah, Randy, on paper, and I've watched every snap that Utah's played the last 2 weeks. And on paper, I don't like the matchup. And after watching what they do, I don't like the matchup. I mean, you're talking about one of the best rushing offenses in the country against one of the worst rushing defenses in the Big 12 in KU. Yep. So, I mean, what you've got to hope is that KU kind of flips the script like Iowa State did last week. Okay, Iowa State's got senior day, and you could tell that Iowa State came out and played physical. And, I mean, they came out ready to play, and they smacked KU in the mouth. So you kind of hope that, there's some energy in the stadium. I do worry about, we've talked about this on the message board, I do worry about the crowd the day after Thanksgiving, 11 a.m. kickoff. The day after Thanksgiving isn't something that the Kansas fans have gotten used to going to. I've always thought that that's got to be a tradition game, and your fan base is, used to going somewhere the day after Thanksgiving.
And looking forward to that game.
Yeah, but so, I mean, it's 11 a.m. kick. I think in our game preview, where we're going to have all of our predictions that we'll post Thursday morning, I think I looked up the weather, and they're saying at kickoff, 37 degrees. So, you hope people show up. I know a lot of the students are gone. So, Listen, having watched Utah's defense, and we talked a little bit about it with Steve there in his preview, Utah's defense now, which is supposed to be good, has just not looked good at all. I mean, they've looked bad, as a matter of fact. They got
destroyed last week against K-State.
Not only that, they got Baylor moved the ball on them too. I mean, Baylor put up 560 yards of total offense. So, Utah's defense, they're missing one of their best players. They're banged up a little bit. Not one of their best players. That's one of the best players in the country, the defensive end that they're going to be missing. So, I do think that there are going to be times where KU should move the football, but we said that against Iowa State. I mean, Iowa State's defense is not the defense that we've seen from Iowa State in the past, and the Jayhawks struggled moving the ball. So, listen, you hope, like I said, you hope this is the game that in the regular season they come out with some emotion, trying to get that 6th win. But Utah's got a lot to play for too, Randy. I mean, we're talking about, slim chances to still get in the Big 12 title hunt, and they're still in the playoff picture, the national championship to get in the playoff. So, they're going to come to Lawrence, and I'm sure they have spent all week figuring out what Kansas State did. And Kansas State went old school, Randy. They went old school Bill Snyder on Utah. I mean, they went back to the extra gap and just blocking and just going all out in the run game. I mean, give K-State credit. The hardest thing when you talk to coaches, the hardest thing to do is really put a game plan together and stick with it. Like as an offensive coordinator, hey, you say, we're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball. But then you get in the late first quarter, and all of a sudden you start mixing in some pass. Kansas State, man, they stuck with that run, and they just stuck with it. So, what's interesting is Nolan Gorsica has been acting as the sixth offensive lineman for a few games now. It's that formation where they bring him in as a tight end, and that's what was successful against Utah. So it'll be interesting to see if KU can mimic some of the things K-State did that they were successful. But I can promise you the Utah defensive coaches have spent all week trying to clean that up, knowing that that's something the Jayhawks are going to do. Randy, in this one, I just think Utah is the better team. I think they got a lot to play for, and KU's got a lot to play for, right? Those kids want to go out on a winning note at home, but
of course,
I just don't. I can't go with the Jayhawks in this one. I've got Utah 38, KU 28. Give me yours.
Ooh, we see this one in a similar fashion as has become the custom, it feels like, over the years as we've done this. I'm saying 35-20 Utah. I wish I was more optimistic about the Jayhawks' chances on Friday. I'm like you. I feel like that they have a lot to play for. Those kids are going to come out and I'm sure they'll play with a lot of heart and really leave it on the field, but I just don't think they don't have the horses on the offensive line and the defensive line to be able to hang with Utah. Even though that defense, as we talked about, has struggled. And I think KU will be able to move the ball. I just don't see them being able to finish drives with the kind of consistency it's going to take to hang in this game. As much as I would love to see them, and I'm sure you're with me on this, as much as we would love to see them become bowl eligible on Friday, excuse me. I just don't see it happening in 2025. So depending on the outcome, we could be getting into transfer portal season very quickly. Kirby, what are you expecting in the month of December? And is there anything that you've been tracking through the kind of the early part of the recruiting season for the Jayhawks?
Well, this game, Randy, there's going to be a decent little group of visitors coming. Some of the committed guys, I got to look at over here. Jalen Mason's coming, Nate Sims, Kevin Sullivan, Naquane Carter, Caden Snyder, Hunter Higgins, and Josh Galbraith are the ones I've confirmed of the committed guys. A couple PWOs, Max Mansky from Aquinas and Jack Reeves from Shawnee Mission East are expected to be there, and some out-of-state guys from 2027 that have some offers. Corey Laga from Illinois, Elijah Wan Houston. Oh no, he can't make it. He told me this morning right before the podcast he's got something about a playoff game rescheduled or something like this. The Mallinger brothers from Wisconsin, both offensive linemen, they have offers. David Parson from Union Grove, Georgia will be there. He's got an offer. So I think they've got 40 something recruits there, and still some guys that hold offers and players who are important in the class. Some of them are still finalizing some plans. And then obviously what we're going to get into, Randy, is, you ask about December. And although the transfer portal doesn't open until January officially, we've already seen it all over the place. I mean, just go follow the On3 transfer portal and Pete Nakos and those guys. And I mean, there's players announcing their intentions to enter the portal left and right. So although they officially won't put their name in the portal because it's not open until January, you're going to see a lot of guys on social media saying, my intentions are to enter the portal. That way they can get representation and agents who can start talking behind the scenes with people, start getting visits lined up, start talking about how much money could be on the table. And man, it almost sounds like pro sports, it really does, but it's about to get crazy on the recruiting trail.
That will do it for another potentially final pregame edition of the 2025 Kansas football season. And this edition of the Inside Slant podcast from jayhawkslant.com. Like Kirby said, don't forget our Black Friday sale. Be sure and share that with the Jayhawk fans in your life and invite them to join the Slant this holiday season. Gift to the Slant. There is nothing better for the KU fan in your life. We also want to wish you and yours a happy Thanksgiving. We're thankful for each of our listeners and the passionate fans of Jayhawk Nation. For my man Shea Wildeboer, my man John Kirby, I'm Randy Withers. You've been listening to the Inside Slant podcast from jayhawkslant.com. We'll talk with you again soon. Rock chalk.
This has been a podcast from jayhawkslant.com.